You know him, you love him. He's the host of Get Your News On with Ron. He also has a new podcast out called 1,000 something, or The Thousands, or something like that. Something with 1,000 in it. I know 1,000 is in the title. And the co-host of the Anything Can Happen game show. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome into the Gotham studios, Ron Placone.
What's up, Graham? It's called 1,000 with Ron Placone. Just 1,000 1,000.
Love
with
it.
Ron Placone. Yeah, and it's my new podcast. Get Your News On with Ron is retired, other than the occasional stream that I do for patrons. So, but yeah, 1,000 is happening, and please, everybody, subscribe, check it out. You can I post clips on YouTube, and you can also get the audio podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's just 1,000 with Ron Placone. Leave us a 5-star review, would you?
And what made you decide to pivot from Get Your News On with Ron to the 1,000?
It's a podcast I've been wanting to do for literally like almost 10 years. And I finally I was like, well, if I don't start it soon, I'm just never going to. And the whole concept is I talk to 1,000 different people who have piqued my interest in some way. So it's kind of like the parallel between the two shows. Get Your News On with Ron. The point of that show was it was news that I wanted people to know about. Well, now it's people I want people to know about, and stories I want people to know about. So all the guests are, handpicked by me. And, there's a reason that I'm having them. And it's so far we've had Jello Biafra, Cory Doctorow, Margaret Kimberly. We've had this episode was my buddy Todd Hibbler, who is a Renaissance Fair professional. And he also helped me. He was one of those guys who was like the most helpful person during a breakup. So we kind of talk about that. So there's like, I interviewed Martin Barr from Jethro Tull, and, asked him about like some of the classic Tull recordings and stuff like that. So interest is a broad concept. So there's still a ton of political stuff, like Jello Biafra, very political interview. Russ Rankin, Good Riddance singer and Green Party activist. That was a really political interview. That's going to come out soon. But then there's also stuff that's about how you can have a career in the Renaissance Fair and being a classic rock guitar player. And my friend Dandy Alwancio is a transgender comedian who just dropped her first album on Kill Rock Stars. So there's all kinds of cool stuff, and I think everyone will. I encourage you to check it out. You're going to find something for you.
How do you make a living as a Renaissance Fair performer?
Well, I guess you have to listen to the podcast, Graham.
Oh, right. No,
it's crazy, man. I mean, it's an amazing story, and yeah, seriously, it's a fun episode. But he literally started doing it's called vegetable justice, and it's when people throw tomatoes at you while you roast them. Like they're throwing tomatoes at you, and they're at Renaissance fairs all across the country. He got a gig doing that. And then that morphed into, now he ended up marrying a chef, and him and his wife have a bunch of food stands in Renaissance fairs all across the country. They franchised it. So they have 72 weekends booked next year, 52 weekends in a year. They have 72 weekends booked because they're franchised to different locations. So he has this big food juggernaut and it all started with, getting tomatoes thrown in his face. And it actually all really started with him collapsing a toilet. So yeah, it's a great story, and we go through it in the podcast. So that is this week's podcast, 1,000 with Ron Placone, wherever you get your podcasts. It's new, so not a lot of people have found it yet. And that's okay, but I'm really, really excited about it. I love these interviews, and I think there's just a lot of stuff that people are really going to love to hear. If you're looking to leave the United States, I interviewed artsy Marxist who left the United States for Mexico, and she basically unpacked how she did it. She's just an artist who was living in Arizona. She had to get out of the United States for health reasons, and she managed to get out, and she explained how she did it. So yeah, that whole well, you can't leave the United States unless you're rich. That's not true.
No.
And she is a case study where she literally explains point by point how she did it. So that's an episode. So yeah, 1000 with Ron Placone, just 1000 with Ron Placone, wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for having me, Graham. I'll see you later.
Just gonna drop some plugs and split. I love it, buddy. Always be plugging.